The cab is going back on the lift again, this time for some weld repairs. Eeh. You can see how dirty the wheels are. We've definitely been putting some miles on the car, giving it some shakedown runs. Really fun. Here's the problem we're trying to solve today. This is the rear suspension, rear sway bar, anti-roll bar, and here's where it attaches to the chassis, and it's not supposed to be cracked like that. So you can stick my whole finger in there. That is not good. So this car is about 33 years young at the moment, and it's got 95,000 miles on it. The suspension, as it corners, one side deflects up, the other side stays down, and the whole point of the roll bar is to keep the car flat in the corners. Well, to do that, it twists the torsion bar or twists the sway bar, and in doing so, it pulls down on the chassis. That's what keeps that inside wheel from jacking up. So it kind of pulls that wheel down, keeps it flat in the corners. 21.2, it's got a little bit of grime and paint on it. Let's call it 21 millimeters, but it looks like it has the 911 part number on it. So it's a stock bar, but because this is a G50 car, I believe it comes with stronger sway bars in the back. So combined with the larger sway bar, a 21 millimeter diameter is pretty big. Combine that with the extra weight of the G50 and the Cabriolet, that's going to really stress this mount. And they haven't changed this mount design since 1965, whenever the 911 was new. It's been the same kind of sheet metal mount since the beginning, so it's definitely due for an upgrade. Here's what the back side of this looks like, and you can see that the design of this is thin sheet metal. I'll measure that in a second, but it's super flimsy, right? And it's cracked, so I can just move it with my fingers. And then the nut, it looks like on the back side of this has been stripped in the past, and somebody has welded it or tried to attach the nut on the back, but it's completely, spinning and just messed up. And then the other thing I noticed is this is the drop link that attaches the roll bar, anti-roll bar, to the suspension arm. And this guy is completely hollowed flat or smashed flat. This side is how it should look. That's how it's supposed to look, nice and round. So that side will pivot. And then this one here, this line, I believe is for the air conditioning. So I'm gonna have to drop that out of the way too. Yeah, I've disassembled everything I need to get disassembled, so I have access to this bracket, which is clearly weak. I got this AC line kind of tied up out of the way. So now I can clean it up and begin welding on it. The battery's disconnected because we're going to weld. We don't want to fry the ECU. I've just finished welding the crack back together. It goes all the way from here. Actually, I welded a little past the crack just to prevent any stress concentrations, but from basically there all the way to here where it was fully broken. And I chose the TIG weld because it's the most malleable, most fatigue resistant weld there is. So now I'm going to go on the flip side or the back side and add some extra strengtheners, because this piece is just free. It's kind of cantilevered. And what happens is it just fatigues up and down. So that's a bad design on Porsche's part. This was not easy. This was basically an upside down weld. Would have been a mess with MIG too. This was cracked right here too, so I welded around the nut. Now I'm going to basically extend these nuts all the way up to this part of the chassis. So all the forces go right into the chassis and not the bracket. Okay, the hardware store didn't have these. Sometimes they have threaded spacers in the bins, but I couldn't find it with the metric threads, and I didn't want to change these bolts to standard. So I ended up making these tubes that are threaded, and they go right up to the chassis, and I'm going to weld along the top. I got to grind some more paint off, but these are sort of modified on the end with the bench grinder to kind of give it that bevel so it fits up tight against that bracket. It's important that you have a bolt in place when you weld this, otherwise the threads may not line up and the threads will bind. This is welded at the top and the bottom now, so it's not going anywhere. There's nowhere it can go. The bolts do thread in just fine. Probably need a little bit of a wrench on that one, but it does work well. So I'm gonna mix up some epoxy primer and get this protected. And then while I'm down here, I want to show you the other side. This is the passenger side, and this brace or bracket has already been replaced. And it looks like it's been replaced, a little hard to see here with that hose, but see how it's reinforced with a sheet metal plate? That's similar to what I did, but I think this is a factory update on this bracket. So whoever replaced it on this side, you can tell they welded a whole new bracket in because it's got all this extra goop up here. And you can see a little bit of bare metal there. I'll put some paint on this side too, but this I think is the Porsche updated part that prevents this problem from happening. So while I think mine is a little stronger than this method, I still think this is okay for a stock car. Also, Elephant Racing makes a one-piece like billet steel piece that's really stout, and I did use those on Benji's car because he didn't have any brackets at all. For this car, I like this method where it sort of retains a lot of originality, but also improves the strength, and it's really undetectable where you can see the welds. And rather than just cut the whole thing off and weld the whole thing on, I was trying to prevent that because if you do a lot of welding up here by the torsion tube, you sort of disrupt the zinc coating and the materials on the inside, and that can cause rust from the inside out. So I tried to do the least invasive repair. Unfortunately, I don't have any black epoxy primer, but this is literally the best stuff to put on bare metal and protect it for the longest period of time. This stuff is probably as good or better than the factory zinc. This is dried now nicely, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it back together. Once the bar's in, I'll probably just dust it with a little bit of black, but this is, like I said, well protected with the epoxy primer. This is SPI brand, love that stuff. Everything's back together now. This piece is still squished. I think I'm gonna replace this. I'm gonna get a new piece because either this hit ground or bottomed out, or someone jacked it up right here. Both sides are sort of squished, and this doesn't keep the rubber in the center. And then, like I said, this one is also squished. So This link and this bracket should be replaced on this side. This side is the same situation. This bracket is crunched. All right, that's a wrap on another repair that didn't cost a fortune to fix. This is something that is destined to break on these cars, and I'm pretty certain this will never break again. Cheers.